Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. On the line with us is Dr. Henry Oster. Sir, am I saying that right? Is it Oster or Oster?
Oh, any way you want, but Oster would be better.
Oster. Okay, thank you. He is the sole survivor of the Holocaust from Cologne, Germany, Germany. He has a new book out. It's called The Kindness of the Hangman. At the age of 89 now, do I have that right, sir?
You have that right, absolutely.
This is remarkable. You were 5 years old when the Nazis came to power in Germany, and you were 16 when Hitler was defeated. From the notes I have and from reading through your book, that was in 1933 when the Nazis came to power. You escaped a firing squad in Auschwitz. You came within hours of starving to death before you were liberated by General Patton's Third Army. What lessons, well, first of all, welcome to our program. I'm so glad to have you with us, sir.
It's an honor to be on your program, Tom. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's a remarkable book. The subtitle, in fact, The Kindness of the Hangman is the title. The subtitle is Even in Hell There Is Hope. A true young German boy's true story of tragedy and triumph from the depths of despair in Auschwitz and Buchenwald to an extraordinary life in America. Henry, or Mr. Oster, you...
No, Henry.
Okay, Henry, you have seen the worst of humanity, the absolute worst of humanity. And there are comparisons being made today by some, including myself from time to time, between the loss of democratic institutions in the United States and the rise of fascism in Germany and Italy and Spain, other countries around the world. I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Well, first of all, I believe that currently, the last, shall we say 2 years, we have seen duplication, replica of the events that I had witnessed, endured, and fortunately survived. I am so Americanized that I'm devastated with the events that we are viewing and experiencing right now. Very disappointing and very discouraging to see that. I actually see the duplication of German propaganda maneuvers, techniques, and obviously the unfortunate not to see the condemnation of these things. So to live in America and see something I'd seen before, to say the least, is disturbing, especially since it seems to have a considerable support. The Germans, of course, went the whole history as an agreement to Hitler's plans and the Nazi philosophy, if you can call it. Here we see examples of it, and yet we find ourselves more or less powerless to change. So it is nothing brand new. It is something in both the propaganda, the promises. Hitler said Germany will rise again. Here we see America great again. These are by words different, but the intent seems to be pretty much of the fascism replication of the past.
I read Milton Mayer's book. He was an American journalist who in the very late 40s, I believe, or maybe even the early 50s, went over to Germany, spent a year there, interviewed at length 10 Germans who were not part of the Nazi movement and were not the victims of the Nazi movement. They just had jobs and they worked all through everything, right? College professor, a bricklayer, a baker, just average people.
Right.
And said, what was going on? And almost to a man, what they said was, number one, there were so many things happening so fast. Literally every day, the news cycle was being inundated with oh, the Nazis just did this, Hitler just did that, Hitler says this, everybody should do that, and some actual genuine positive reforms. We're going to build the Autobahn. Other things, oh, we regret that we're going to have to, we're going to have to do this to the trade unionists. Number one. Number two, the big lie strategy these people reported, you know, these enormous lies, you know, one of the most horrific, obviously, about the Jews, were told and repeated over and over and over again to the point that they became conventional wisdom. And number three, that the administration of the German government at the time had become so incestuous, essentially, so inward looking, that either you were with the cult or you were against the cult, and there was no middle ground. Is that an accurate depiction of what you experienced growing up in Germany, you know, from the time when Hitler came to power in 1933 until he was kicked out 12 years later?
No, that's absolutely correct. Well, first of all, there were only, in 1933, 600,000 Jews in all of Germany in a population of 60 million. And with the indoctrination from childhood on, at least since 33, that with Hitler used, that they were superior, that they were above everybody else, and everybody else designated as subhuman were exactly subhuman. They ate it up. They were actually convinced of that.
The Germans thought that they were the master race.
Not every German was a Nazi. There were only 8 million party members, but the doctrines that the Nazi had was readily accepted by the whole population and enthusiastically supported. Now, the idea of eliminating Jews became a minor thing. After all, we're only 1% of the population. But one reason the Germans went for it, even those that were not entirely supportive of Hitler, was the threat of concentration camps. After the war, everybody said, oh, we had no idea. Of course they did. You had Gestapo, which would be the equivalent to FBI in our country, in every certain area of each city, and they walked around in their leather coats, intimidating the population that if we don't adhere to what the Nazis and our party is doing, Daddy will probably disappear, at least 3 days confinement in the Gestapo headquarters, or if it was something more contrived or imaginary violation, they would end up in a concentration camp. Because if you ask neighbors for any assistance, they always told you, well, we don't want to end up in a concentration camp. And after the war, they all said, well, we didn't know anything about it. These were absolutely, with no doubt about it, untruths and basic denials, if not lies. And so Germany went that. They loved uniforms and flags. One of the things why somebody we know here wants to have a parade. I never use our president's name, by the way. I think people know that. He wants to have a parade, which the Germans were famous for. He didn't object to the parade of neo-Nazis in Charlottesville. The thing is, there are permissions, a permissive attitude of our government that will encourage people like the Nazis to become encouraged here to have certainly un-American ideas, un-American convictions, and actually un-American deeds that are as uncommon for us. Now, admittedly, and unfortunately, in World War II, we had America First, also restricting immigration and not letting refugees from Europe come into this country. So Mr. President probably thinks he can repeat it this time, especially for whatever reason he proposes. It appeals to a segment of our population, and they should also and definitely be ashamed of it.
We're talking to Henry Oster, the author of The Kindness of the Hangman at 89 years old, the last surviving citizen of Cologne, Germany, who survived the Holocaust. Henry, how did you end up in Auschwitz and Buchenwald?
Well, first of all, that was kind of automatic. There were 2,011 Jews from the city of Cologne. And by the way, only 23 survived the war. All were killed, and it was in 2011 that I was notified and discovered to be the last surviving of these 2011. People were taken forcefully, put on trains, and sent, in this case, my family to a ghetto. a ghetto, the Warsaw Ghetto and Auschwitz, the large ghetto, were parts of the city, dilapidated, run down, where they crammed as many Jews as possible, like a holding pattern, like some place that they will hold them and gradually send them out by nightly daylight raids, put them on trucks, and simply send them to Auschwitz. There were 6 various facilities around the major cities of Poland, primarily Poland, because when they started World War II, the Germans inherited 3 million Polish Jews. And how are you going to get rid of them? Only by German efficiency, I guess. They built facilities were called extermination camps. These were camps where you arrived and you died. There were no overnight facilities to have anybody stay for one night even. So when they actually took the concentration camp idea and converted to extermination camp, and Germany had over 2,000 concentration camps, but there were these 6 facilities in Poland just for killing, they gradually took people from the ghettos and from sometimes directly from Germany or prisoners of war and send them to these camps. In this particular case, my dad had already died of starvation in a ghetto. My mom and I were caught, put on train, and sent to Auschwitz. Now, Auschwitz, just for a little accuracy, is a huge complex. All the German factories, the machinery, the chemicals, everything was produced there, and Auschwitz was considered to be the labor to supply these people for forced labor. The second and most important and the most deadly part of Auschwitz was Birkenau, a mile and a half away. That extermination facility of Auschwitz.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Henry Oster escaped a firing squad in Auschwitz and came within hours of starving to death before liberation by Patton's Third Army. We'll be back with him. Henry, we're back, and you were telling the story of Auschwitz. Forgive the interruption.
Okay, so when you arrived by all the railroad facilities from all over Europe, surprisingly could reach Birkenau, which was only a mile and a half away from the concentration camp of Auschwitz, where the forced labor was being kept, and everybody had to go to work from there. But when you arrived in Birkenau, the Nazis made a selection, who will live and who will die. You had to look or be 15 years or older to be even considered to remain alive. All other children, every other child was immediately killed in the various gas chambers and following, obviously, in the crematorium. I have never known why I was so lucky to be at the age of 16 to be selected to live. We were put into the Birkenau facility. They asked never to have any volunteers. Somehow, miraculously and idiotically, one day I did volunteer, and turned out to be 131 boys were taken to be working in the next few weeks and months in stables to support the German army. They needed horses to invade Russia. From then, in January, we were forced on a death march because we did not know we were being taken away just 10 days before the Auschwitz and all the facilities surrounding it was going to be liberated by the approaching Russian army from the east. They put us on trains. We were attacked by Allied fighter planes because these were open livestock wagons, and they had the order that all retreating German military to defend Germany for the last few months should not arrive. They could not recognize us with striped uniforms from any other military branch, but I survived it. And we ended up in Buchenwald. I could not believe I would be back in my godforsaken country of birth, which Buchenwald was in Germany. Auschwitz and Birkenau, of course, were all in Poland, along with the other 5 extermination centers. There I was kept and not fed, as it was not customary to get more than a piece of bread, and not even every day. 1,500 boys had been gathered in that camp from all over Europe to be put into one huge abandoned stable. The stable was infected with typhus, and 926 survived on the day that Patton liberated the camp, April 11th. And that is how I survived. The terrible statistics that only 1/10, and I repeat, 1/10 of 1% of all juveniles arriving in camps were kept alive, because Hitler and the Nazis had the doctrine, if you want to call it that we must eradicate the Jewish children first. If they survive, they would procreate, and what have we accomplished in the future if we don't kill them now?
Remarkable.
That's why children had little chance of survival in any of the selections.
Sir, we've got about a 10-second pause here, and we'll be right back. It's 22 minutes past the hour. We're talking to Henry Oster. We'll be right back with him in just a moment. Henry Oster is with us. He is the last survivor of the Holocaust from Cologne, Germany. He was 5 years old when Hitler came to power in 1933. He was 16 years old when Hitler was defeated. He's 89 years old now. He escaped the firing squad in Auschwitz. He was nearly starved to death. Patton liberated him. Henry, you were talking very eloquently, and by the way, we only have about 3 minutes left here. You were talking very eloquently about the camps and that you were taken to, and how many of them were, not specifically death camps. As Donald Trump is building these detention facilities, 30,000, 40,000 person detention facilities on military bases around the United States, is it an exaggeration? Is it hysteria to say that there's some parallel?
It's a little bit more than a parallel, because while the intention is obviously not to kill children, but the pain, the agony, and the damage in memories to be ripped away from your parents, kept literally in cage-like structures, fences surrounding that couldn't even climb over it, and being treated in a number of ways, not all of them being favorable. It does damage your psyche. It does damage your memory, because nobody wants to be torn away. The most painful memory of my experience was when I did arrive in Birkenau. My mother was torn away and died the same day that she arrived. And I can sympathize and feel and certainly identify myself with children that have to go through the same thing right now. Not that the parents will be killed, but absence is absence.
Yeah.
If they're not there, you're going to be painfully reminded that you lost your parent, and you have no idea when and if they will be reunited. It's a painful experience, whether it's in war and peace, but certainly has no business in a country like ours.
Yeah.
And that's why, if I may, I will, if you see the picture, what I think is the most dramatic, and I think should be a prize-winning cover of Time magazine. This is the example of pain at its utmost. This is the agony of a child looking up at the worst image. It will be a memory, a reminder for the rest of a little boy's or little girl's life. It cannot be eradicated.
We have a little less than a minute. You came to the United States with no English, no money, no education. What are your thoughts on the way that this administration is treating immigrants and refugees?
Well, first of all, number one, the discouraging aspect of having immigrants come here to begin with is shameful. Europe and European countries put us to shame. We're a laughingstock in the international relations or recognition. We're no longer the leader of the world. We're just a come along and go along, and poorly at that. The fact that we are a country based on immigrants, started by immigrants, created by immigrants and supported. We used to have the welcome mat out, and I am afraid that the flame of liberty of freedom and justice and whatever it promises is gradually being extinguished. And I sure as hell don't want to see the arm come down horizontally with a post, get out and stay out. And that, I think, is what we're getting to and allowing to get it to.
Right.
And it is not what I think America stands for.
Amen. Henry Oster, the author of The Kindness of the Hangman. Hang on just a second, sir.
The Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
The website is thekindnessofthehangman.com. Henry, thank you so much for being with us.
My pleasure and honor. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, sir.